Good evening. My name's Darren Hawkins. I'm the Group Strategy Director at McCann, and I work on the Aldi UK and Ireland accounts. This case study is about a campaign we ran for several years called Like Brands. It's one of the most successful campaigns in recent UK advertising history. The campaign covers two markets. It covers country Great Britain and United Kingdom, which is the blue and red flag on the right, and it covers the Republic of Ireland, the green and orange flag on the left. This campaign starts its story in 2008 when the recession struck. At this time, you would expect that a discount supermarket would do very well. But counterintuitively, the fortunes of our discount supermarket, Aldi, actually deteriorated. Their growth rates slowed down dramatically in the very depths of this recession. Why was this? Focus groups revealed the biggest barrier to shopping more at Aldi was that people couldn't do a full shop. And the reason they couldn't do a full shop is because Aldi didn't sell big brands. Why are big brands so important to customers? Even value-conscious customers. It's because brands were equated with high quality, even synonymous with high quality. Yet Aldi was famous for low prices, but to some extent also perhaps low quality. So what that meant was, in the time of recession, that with less money going round, people had less to spend. Maybe they should have been looking for ways to save money. But what they did instead was tried to lower their risk. They actually looked for ways not to waste their money. And potentially, if you don't trust the brand or you don't trust the products of the own label supermarket, spending money in there, however little, is potentially a waste of money. So, at the same time, we had bigger competitors with bigger ranges, fuller service supermarkets, all trying to project their own price credentials to show that they were in fact the cheapest place you could shop. We have a lot of noise in that. We get things like campaigns called rollback, price crunch, price crash, value to shout about, brand match. There was a lot of noise on price in the marketplace. If you step back from all this noise, effectively what we're saying to people is that grocery shopping is actually really complicated. There's an awful lot to know about prices. But they've done all the maths. They've built a big system. They've got in the experts. They've done the thinking for you. And guess what? Hey, you're better off with us. When we looked at this advertising and research, this is how consumers felt. Effectively, all this big business talk said to consumers that the business was bigger than them, saw them as very small. When you start thinking, well, there's 4,000 items cheaper in Tesco, but there's 3,000 items cheaper in Asda. But then again, I only buy 20 things. Are those the ones that are cheaper? In a rational sense, the consumer's mindset was very confused. A lot of this conversation was going over their head and was very disengaging. In fact, what they said to us is that it felt like the two supermarkets were having arguments with each other. They even said, I don't think they're actually talking to me. They were saying, look, we're cheap. And then somebody else was saying, hey, we're cheaper. And then somebody else, no, we're the cheapest. That's what it's saying to the customer if you're listening. But the trouble is, the customer had stopped listening. To stand out from these big supermarkets with their big, onerous conversations, with their experts shouting at and hectoring customers, Aldi did the complete opposite. We allowed consumers to feel much more emotional empathy with the Aldi brand by bringing a unique humour that gave our ads a tremendous amount of talkability with consumers. Effectively, we exploited the psychology of the human brain. This is a simplification, really. What it shows you is the main areas that are involved in decision making. In the centre, the limbic brain is the oldest part of the brain, the most primitive. It covers things like security, food, ego, sex, power, curiosity. It's often referred to as the inner chimp because it exists on primal responses. And then at the front of the brain, we have the neocortex, which is the most recent evolution. It's where our evolved higher human faculties reside. It's where logic, reasoning, rules, manners, language all sit. It's effectively the modern man. But because it's newer, it's not as quick and instinctive as the ancient inner chimp, the limbic brain. It takes time to process. And that's where thinking about human beings as chimps first has an advantage, because it works this way round. The chimp responds almost immediately to any stimulus. It can't help it. It's an instinctive reaction. So this applies to how advertising works really well. While you're doing something else, it leaps out at you. It's an ambush medium. There's no time to reflect, no time to absorb all the facts, to check them, to check the source, to think about the logic, to make a balanced judgment. So your first response to advertising is often a very emotional and deep response from the oldest part of the brain, your inner chimp. So what we had to do was to find some common ground between these consumers who saw Aldi as cheap and low quality and not for them and not the place where they buy the brands they love. But we had to find some way of being able to relate to them. We had to say to them, yeah, we know Aldi's a little bit different. It's not like other supermarkets. But hey, maybe we could still be good together. We had to show consumers that we understood their needs, that the environment in Aldi wasn't quite as alien as they might think it would be. Now, what I said before about brands setting the consumer standards, consumers really knew their brands. Brands were the benchmark of quality in their lives. Brands like Domestos, bleach, Fairy Liquid, washing liquid, Lurpak, butter, etc. But brands were also Aldi's quality benchmark. Aldi base a lot of their product designs on looking like, as close as possible, not illegally, but just as close as possible. So the consumer's got some chance of understanding which product this is going to be most like. Often based on the design codes of the brand leader. So, if I sum up the campaign strategy here, first of all, the majority of Aldi shoppers were very disloyal. We had very few high loyal shoppers and lots of low loyal shoppers. We had to focus on making those disloyal shoppers more loyal to Aldi. Those shoppers wanted brand names for quality assurance. So what we had to try and do was create some kind of parity between the brand they know and the Aldi product that's most similar to it. We knew then that also they had little emotional connection to Aldi because they hadn't spent a lot of time in the store. So what we hoped to do was to try and get customers to recommend Aldi to each other. So we had to find a way to get them to like us, to recommend us. So the big creative idea we came up with was a campaign called Like Brands, which the strapline was, like brands, only cheaper. The first commercial I'm going to show you is a commercial called Tea. Now, so often in the advertising world, we see a lot of perfect people. It's called a being aspirational. It's playing on the fact that people are insecure. The idealized self in most ads doesn't really have everyday problems. They're an unmitigated success. Everything really works well for him or her. The brand's role is often suggested as intrinsic to this success. If you think about most perfume advertising like Chanel Bleu or Invictus, most perfume ads, what you see is very idealized people. But people don't shop at discounters for image reasons. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So we actually selected ordinary people. Aldi was saying, by picking ordinary people, Aldi was saying, this is how real people look. This is how real people think. These are people like you. What we were establishing was relevance on an emotional level to the target audience.
I buy this tea for my husband. He likes tea. He also likes this one. tea. I like gin.
And you can see from that, there's a bit of a sense of humour going on there. It's not telling a joke. It's dry, everyday humour. It's the sort of things that British people say to each other off the cuff in informal moments. But the British public found this very funny. They find their own foibles, their own weaknesses, their own the things that they say and do funny when they're played back to them. So that's what we were doing in these ads. We were taking the images of and the way that British people cope with life through humour, cope with the imperfections of life through humour, and we were playing those back to the British public as a way of establishing an emotional connection and relevance. Here's another one.
I like this one, and I like this one. And I don't like boys.
The little girl whispers there at the end, "I don't like boys." It's the sort of things little girls say. So that's just a couple of examples of how we were able to use humour to make a comparison between the big brand and the Aldi brand and establish quality equivalence. So what were the objectives for this campaign? Well, first of all, sales growth plus 11%. We decided to try and increase our frequency and our basket size by just one item initially. That was our target. On a quality level, clearly, it was to try and reduce the gap between Aldi and the competition. And then longer term, it was about brand affinity to make Aldi more loved. What happened? Straight away, this campaign was an instant success. As soon as we aired the campaign, sales began to rise dramatically. Sales growth rates accelerated. In fact, what we achieved in the first year of the campaign was not the 11% target, but over 30% sales growth in the first year. Our frequency of shopping increased by 38%, and our average household spend, not by just one item, but by an extra 28% year on year. In terms of payback, in terms of return of marketing, return on investment, in the first 2 years of the campaign, which was the first period that it ran, paid back almost 3.5 times the total investment in the communication. We started doing, later on as we developed this campaign, we developed into all sorts of areas. We did parodies, we did skits of other advertisements, we took on media phenomenon, popular TV shows. This is one of the later executions in which we actually tried to do an ad to promote diversity, and this features a disabled child who is completely deaf. So this campaign actually was the spearhead of an advertising break, the first all sign language advertising break in the UK. Okay. Long-term sales growth. Aldi had been, when we began this campaign, Aldi was smaller than its biggest rival, which is a very similar store, Lidl. By the end of the campaign, the first phase of the campaign in 2012, we'd overtaken Lidl, and now we're by 2018 we're about 1/3 larger than the Lidl stores. If I go on to long-term value share, since 2011, in the 8 years between 2011 to 2018, Aldi almost quadrupled its value share, growing to 6.6%. It's now well over 8%. Our long-term quality perceptions over the course of this campaign, we went from an 18.4% deficit to a 13% deficit overall on quality. Bear in mind, we're still a discounter selling a lot of cheap products. And then the long-term payback, if you look at the long-term, this campaign is now stretched out over, this analysis, over 8 years. We're at a payback of about 4.25 times the total investment in the campaign. It also was voted ad of the decade for the 2010s by the British public in a survey by the popular industry magazine Marketing Week magazine. And also, of course, which is why we're here talking to you today, this paper was the winner of the Grand Effie at the Euro Effie Awards 2019 in Belgium. And I'm holding the trophy there. It's not a big trophy, but it's a nice one to win. Well, all that remains to say is thank you and good night. So, spasiba, Moscow, and spokojnej nojcze, Effie Russia.